Welcome, everybody. And the Angela says the newsletter says there will be ongoing meetups, Santa Monica and Griffith Park. How about Balboa? Yes, this weekend we're going to decide whether we're going to meet in Balboa as well this Sunday. But it looks like there are a bunch of people who want to do all three locations: Balboa Sunday, Santa Monica, and Griffith Park on Saturdays. We are going to have a little fun run with your medal, wear your medal, and we're going to have a little fun run, like 2 miles or something, and then we'll all sit down or stand and eat. The run in Santa Monica, of course, is not at the Fairmont. We hope to be back there next season, but it's with the LA Running Club in Santa Monica, just north of the San Vicente on Ocean Avenue. And Griffith Park, we're on the children's playground. The children's playground is called, and if you type in your Google Maps, Shane's Inspiration, Shane apostrophe S, Shane's Inspiration, that children's playground will come up because that's the name of it. That's where we're meeting this Saturday in Griffith Park, and then Balboa Park at our normal location, the end of kind of like near the driving range, but on Sunday. All three will start at our normal time, 7 o'clock, and then we do a little run. 8 o'clock, we eat. So bring a little dish or something, maybe half a pound of chopped fruit or a couple bagels or whatever it is, 2 gallons of juice or whatever you want to bring. And we always have a truckload of food, so you enjoy. It should be a fun morning, Saturday and Sunday on all three of those locations. And we do hope to keep it going in our Balboa Park location on Sundays as well. So we'll see this weekend. Okay, now to get down to the bare bones, to the real deal here, we're talking. Thank you for coming here today, and hopefully you're seeing all of this. And here we go. If you are an athlete, if you have a body, you are an athlete. Bill Bowerman. I love that quote. That's me, the book. And okay. So the season is over. There are a lot of people that actually suffer depression. It's over. It's done. You've accomplished all of your goals. You did a marathon. Maybe you did the half marathon as well. You're done. Over. Did it. The rest of your life, you will be able to call yourself a marathoner, but you have no goals. You have nothing to look forward to, nothing to motivate you to get up in the morning. Well, here's a simple idea. Create a new goal. Wow, I know. It could be a goal to get faster. It could be a goal to maybe increase volume. I've seen people who had a goal that, they were almost at 1,000 miles for the season. They want to get to 1,000 miles for the entire season, adding it all up. That's often a cool goal, which also does get you faster. The greater the volume throughout the season, generally speaking, the faster you get, the greater your fitness will be. So the faster you get. But more important than anything, and we're going to talk about goal setting in 2 seconds, just really quick, because I know we've done that before right after the LA Marathon. Celebrate. Have fun. Come out Saturday and Sunday. I just mentioned the potluck medal run before that, 7 o'clock, and then the 8 o'clock potluck. Celebrate. You did an amazing thing. And then, hopefully you went into your office and you had that attitude and people said, did you do the half marathon? Did you do the marathon? I mean, how long is it? And you have to have this attitude. And the attitude is really simply, oh, yeah, it was only 26 miles. It was easy. Even if it was the hardest thing, which it probably was, that you've ever done in your entire life, ever, you need that attitude just to watch their mouths hit the floor on how amazing a human being you are. And they'll probably, it was really easy. And oh, yeah, it's no big deal. Uh-huh. Anyway, um, now in the off season, we're going to talk about this a little more. You want to go from general training, or in this case, specific training to general training, and then back to specific training again. And we'll talk about that in a second. We've been doing more marathon race pace. We've done some races, obviously, at marathon race pace. We need to maybe slow it down, maybe play tennis, maybe play basketball, go swimming, do different things, take a couple weeks off of taper. Let your central nervous system relax. That's an important thing that you just like relax. And that's okay if you lose a little bit of fitness because you'll end up building back more fitness and greater strength if right now you focus more on strength training and stretching to kind of rehabilitate those muscles that you've maybe cannibalized a little bit on those long runs. When you run long, 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 you start to take protein from your muscles because your muscles are all protein. And you can actually end up the end of a season weaker than early in the season. That's why we do these tapers so that your muscles can regrow and you can rebuild hormone levels. And we'll talk about all that in just a minute. And I also want to talk about the season and what the terms are and pre-comp, comp, all that stuff. Stuff you've never really seen probably before from me or maybe anywhere. What is it that coaches talk about? Any rate, so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And let's dive into it. And here we go. So this is a diagram I've shown before, a picture, just to give you an idea, as a visual idea of the entire season. You start at general training is more general training and general training, which would be strength training, tennis, swimming, biking, whatever it is, general training, something other than running at marathon race pace. And as the season progresses, you do less and less and less and less of that. And as the season progresses, you do more and more of this little thing over here. It's more and more specific training. Specific training would be if you're doing a marathon race pace. Not to say that all you do toward the end of your season is marathon race pace, but as you progress, you do more and more of that, less and less and less of the other stuff. You may want to maintain strength and stretch. You may want to get rid of things like bowling, which has nothing to do with pretty much, except for maybe your biceps to keep your arms up there when you're running. I don't know. But a swimming, um, swimming can stretch you out a little bit. That's not a bad thing to do every so often. But you want to do less and less of that as the season progresses and more specific training. Got it? Okay, enough said. Now, here's a new one that I don't think you guys have ever seen before. I did this for a class actually, but a certification class, I should say. But this person had, we started in September like everybody else. We built for the LA Marathon training, as you can see, and this is what we call a macro schedule. And what a macro schedule is it's not really every individual day, but it's the entire season. Got it? So you're looking at all these dates, June, July, August, September, on and on and on, the entire season, May, and then it starts June again, right? So this person, theoretically, I did this a long time ago, was supposed to have the Rose Bowl half in January on the 14th, and then the LA Marathon on March, I believe, the 17th or something like that. At any rate, and then another half marathon that was kind of an A race for this person, which is really this weekend. Okay. And at any rate, things didn't quite work out that way, obviously, because of the fires and everything else, but you can see how it all lines up. You have general preparation work. You have specific preparation work. Remember, you go from general to specific. So you go from general meaning low heart rate, playing tennis, playing, swimming, whatever it is, building that endurance for all of these weeks. That's a long general prep. That's like a big chunk of your summer right there. And you can even expand it longer, truthfully. And I'll explain that in a second. Then you go to specific preparation. One, and then pre-competition one, and then main competition, which means you're like tapering and you're about to do your race. So those are some of and then you transition all over again and you go through the soul cycle all over again. This person just jumped right into pre-comp competition and then main competition for the LA Marathon, as all of you would have done. Um, and then another transition, and then he's getting ready for his half marathon this weekend. So you don't need to dive back into general prep and specific prep earlier season. Now, here's something about that. Um, this is called a macro schedule. It's the whole year, right? A meso schedule is what you guys see online, where every day is kind of filled in and you see all the workouts the whole season. Oftentimes, meso schedules aren't quite that detailed. Pardon me. And then there's micro schedules where the micro schedule really is 1 week. And that's where you really see everything in detail, every workout in detail, but for one entire week. So our meso schedules have all the details for all the days of the week for the months that we're training. Um, so there's macro, meso, and micro. Got it? Something to consider when you're talking to a coach and he's spewing terms. Now you know. Okay. Anyway, so um, when you are in when you do low heart rate work, what we call endurance training, right? We've discussed this before, where you're training your body. The lower your heart rate, the more you use fat, right? The lower your heart rate, the more you use fat. The higher your heart rate, the more you use glycogen. You get to a point where you're using all glycogen. That's all you're using. But keep in mind, and these things don't just suddenly snap. It's a slow progression of heart rate as your heart rate's going up and up and up and up. Fat consumption is going down while glycogen consumption is going up. Right. So the lower the heart rate, the more you're training your body to use fat. That's what we call endurance because there's way more in every human of fat than there is glycogen, which comes from carbohydrate. It is a limited reservoir for resource for fuel from carbohydrate, right? But it's an abundant reservoir for fuel from fat, right? So if you could get to consume fat at a slightly higher level, more of it at a higher level, then you're going to go farther faster, right? To do that, you generally need high heart rate work. But even if you could just consume more fat by building at low, and you only do this at low heart rate, by building more mitochondria, more oxidative enzymes, more capillary veins and arteries that help you recycle all this stuff. And just in general, I'll say use fat more efficiently. We call that endurance. Endurance means you can go farther, which you have more fat, you're more efficient, you can go farther. Got it? Right? Okay. And in most cases, you can go farther faster, but we'll get to that in a sec. So, um, most of the season, you don't lose, you lose endurance slowly. You could take off for a couple of weeks, get injured. Don't try this. Don't get injured. You could take off for a couple of weeks and you pretty much still have the same endurance, right? After 2 weeks off or whatever. You'd lose very little. You would, however, lose speed. Your glycogen level, where you're still using only glycogen, that threshold would come down, right? So you'd need to rebuild that threshold by doing speed work. Here's the problem for off season. You can maintain endurance and build endurance. It takes a long time to build endurance. We have a long time during the off season. It doesn't take long to build anaerobic threshold, raise the bar so you're still using glycogen. But you'll lose it very quickly. It comes down very quickly. So you maintain fat consumption, but you lose carbohydrate consumption in the form of glycogen. And my dog wants to get down. There we go. Anyway, sorry. Um, you lose that very quickly, the carbohydrate consumption ability, right? So, and doing high heart rate, doing speed work, doing high threshold work, high heart rate, um, that's a greater risk of injury, which we're also going to talk about in a second. Diminishing returns and increased risk of injury. So the best you can probably do, because you have a long summer ahead of you until September when we start up with the Santa Monica Classic again. And before then, you may want to do some speed work just to get ready for the 5 or 10K if you want to do the Santa Monica Classic. And I hope you do. It's a fun race here in Santa Monica. Um, but the best thing you can do right now, rebuild that strength, the strength training, rebuild that flexibility with foam rollers and stretching gently. Those 3-minute stretches are great. Wherever you find you are tight, do those for 3 minutes or a minute and a half, like 6 days a week. Right? With those 10-second repetitions. So you do it for 10 seconds, you release for a second, do it 10 more seconds, release for a second. So either 9 or 18 of those, right? At 10-second repetitions. So let's move on. So, generally speaking, this whole area in here, general prep, is really mostly about just low heart rate work with throw in some other stuff here and there. Okay. So you can look at your zones down here, high, medium, and low. And you'll note high does not have, and this is special prep. This is pre-comp, excuse me, special prep and pre-comp. So now you're really getting into the nitty-gritty with all these numbers. And here you can see that even though you're getting close to your marathon, this is serious training now. The high intensity zone 4 is not that big. The numbers aren't that huge, right? The biggest is like right here around 10, 11, getting ready for the LA Marathon. Then you peak and taper. Here's another one, peak and taper, 10, 9, getting ready for this half marathon. Marathon race pace, zone 3, half marathon race pace, same thing. You got a 20 miler right, well, really before the LA Marathon. And then I'm sorry. This is a weekly total for these are weekly totals for these different thresholds. Sorry, and then zone 2, without question, you have your highest numbers, your highest volume, building in this case to 56 miles of easy pace throughout the entire peak week. And here's another one, 55 miles peak week before the half marathon here. And then the totals all the way down here at the bottom. This person is peaking at like 80, 82 miles and then doing the LA Marathon taper and then LA Marathon. Got it? So 2.5 week taper, roughly, something like that. The 40 miles includes the 26.2, I believe, of marathon race pace. Does it? Yeah, it says 26 miles here. I'm not sure. Maybe I screwed that up. Anyway, um, there you go. So, goal setting really quick, and then we'll get into a little more about training. Um, be grateful. Start with being grateful. A goal needs to be positive, and in order to create a positive goal, you need to start by being grateful for something. If you're homeless, darn it, be thankful you have a blanket. Whatever your goal is going to be, start with being grateful. Imagine, your wildest dreams. Just go crazy. Imagine what you want to do. Often, I heard a coach, Mark Allen, a triathlon coach, one of the top in the world, won Kona like 6 times, amazing human being, said have 3 goals. If you're doing a race goal, have like, I'm going to win the race. I'm going to like have a PR in the race, and then I'm just going to finish the darn race. And one way or another, you'll be able to celebrate. And celebration and remaining positive is really an important characteristic of all of this. I see more people crossing that finish line and they do this. They do this. Oh, damn. And they're looking at their watch, right? Um, and they missed their goal. Well, they finished. They did a friggin' marathon. Celebrate. You know, you may have missed your goal by a little bit. But here's another one. When you're creating a new goal, if you missed your finish time goal, if that was one of your maybe three goals for a race, if you missed your finish time goal, hey, you can do it again next time. You got the same goal. You've lost nothing. You can be grateful that you finished. And now you can be grateful that you did as well as you did. Maybe you were close to your goal finish time. Now you know this course a little better. Now you know where to nail it and where to hold back. And maybe next time you're going to do it. Remain positive. Some of the fastest runners I know, generally speaking, are really pretty positive people about doing well or not living up to their own expectations. Remain positive. After you create a goal or goals, create a plan, sit down, write it out, map it out like I do, these meso schedules, daily workouts, you know, or like that plan that we were just looking at, that macro schedule, you can kind of plot it out for the whole season and then add the workouts that kind of fill in each week later on. And then implement, go for it, you know? And if you can do a little bit of volume in your off season, definitely take some time right now to do way less to rebuild, like I said, your rest, your central nervous system, so you come back stronger. Sometimes you take a day off and you get faster. You know, I remember hearing a lecture from one of the top Ironman coaches in the world. And she's written books on this topic, and she's had her women winning Kona, the Ironman. And she said, you know, sometimes my athletes are tired. I give them a whole week off. They come back stronger and faster. You know, sometimes you're too much and you need to taper down. You need to rebuild those hormone levels. And you do, without question, all of us at all times need to build like 2, 3 weeks for a plan and then taper and then build higher and taper and build higher and higher and higher, on and on and on. But you need those interval taper weeks to rebuild hormones, to rebuild cells for your muscle tissue, right? You know, those little filaments are made up of strands of beads, single beads of protein, right? That's why we need to eat protein. It's our muscles are almost 100% protein, beads of molecules of protein. All right. We rebuild them and we rebuild hormones to rebuild them during times of rest. That's why you hear, you know, when you rest, that's where you gain from the work that you put in, because your muscles are getting stronger and more efficient, and all these things, these physiological changes are implementing into your body, right? During rest, not during more. Okay. You can end up slower and slower and slower and slower by doing more and more and more and more and more without taper. In fact, if that's all you did was build, right? You probably would start getting slower and slower and slower. I pretty much guarantee it. You'd be tired all the time for weeks, and that would slow down your speed work, certainly. So you would never be able to do heart rate work at high enough heart rate, probably, to really benefit from it after a long time. Anyway, like I said, and then go for it. Just implement, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go for it. This person that I showed you this example of, I've been following his daily output of volume, and early on in like early season, like September, October, November, December, his schedule just really, I developed charts, and those charts look really just, they're missing. You know, the line is not fluid because he was missing a lot of days here and there and here and there. And only when he began to like fill it all in, you know, so there was a solid squiggly line, excuse me, that's when he really started to take off. And he's been having a PR ever since on everything he does. His Garmin on Strava keeps saying, this was your fastest, you know, does that, or your second fastest run on this course. you know, and it's all about volume and consistency. When he started getting consistent, blam. Early on, he started getting volume. And the interesting thing is he ended up hospitalized because he got really, really sick because he didn't have the ability he wasn't building slowly. He just kind of jumped into some high mileage and ended up getting sick. Yes, he was around someone who was sick and understandable, but would he have gotten sick had he not done it that way? Had he been more consistent? Good question. But I think, he did the same volume later on and he didn't get sick at all. He even did more volume, but it was consistent. It was a slower build. He also does a lot of strength training on a daily basis. This is someone who's really fast. So, diminishing returns. The better you get toward your 100%, right? The more you will experience diminishing returns. Like someone right off the couch to 20% of their ability. The first 6 weeks, someone who's a couch potato is going to see enormous increases in ability, right? Just skyrocketing. And then 20 to 40%, still pretty skyrocketing if you look at this, graph. But then 40 to 60, there are a little bit of diminishing returns. 60 to 80, more diminishing. It's less returns, right? They're diminishing. And then if you really look at like 90 to 100, your increase in ability is not that great, right? On the other hand, if you really wanted to win the race, risk it, but do a lot of strength training. So, all that pounding that you're doing, all that volume that you're doing to get you to a point where your ability is at your 100%, whatever that may be. And most people never reach that point where they are at 100%. Most people don't. However, if you do get way up there, even with diminishing returns, you have to decide, what about increased risk of injury, meaning accelerating setbacks, right? Because from 0 to 20%, your risk injury, meaning your setback risk, is pretty much not much, right? But suddenly 20 to 40, it's increasing. 40 to 60, it's now way up there. 60 to 80, not on this little graph, but now you're really accelerating what could be setbacks, meaning risk of injury. Injury is a setback, right? So you have to weigh it out. Do you want to risk injury? Well, you decrease the risk of injury by strength training. Like I said, this person doing 100 miles in a week, which he really is doing now, since that macro schedule I showed you. He peaked at about 140 miles in a week, went down to 108, I think it was, something like that. Anyway, and then tapered. He does a lot of strength training every day so he doesn't get injured, right? So if you want to get up to being faster, it means, generally speaking, greater volume of, yes, some speed work, yes, more low heart rate zone 2 work, and later in the season, more zone 3 work, which we would call marathon race pace or half marathon race pace, high and low and zone 3. Why don't we just do all zone 3? Thank you for asking me that question, David. Why don't we do everything at marathon race pace? Well, for one thing, we can get rid of this screen. For one thing, and this is the next screen I'll jump into in a minute. But for one thing, as you're going longer and longer and longer and longer, your heart rate is going up and up and up and up and up and up and up with dehydration and fatigue. So if you're doing a long run and you don't start at zone 2, you may end up at zone 4 by the end of your run. I mean, how many of you had ended up like a 18, 20-mile run, breathing pretty hard, like as if you've been running a threshold run, except you're way slower? It's just you're dehydrated and fatigued. And I won't go into explaining why that works, but your heart rate has been going higher and higher and higher. And you're now at a higher level than where you're going to be utilizing fat to increase the efficiency of your fat consumption. You're now just glycogen only, right? So you don't want that. So start at least at zone two. I see so many people start at like zone three or four, and then they slow down and slow down and slow down and slow down. The problem with that is, your heart rate is still kind of increased. You're kind of pushing to finish. You're not really getting now zone two to become more efficient with fat consumption, right? It's not about speed for the entirety of your training specific run or run, walk, or walk. I'm talking to runners, run walkers, and walkers, right? All the same. We're human. We have a human body. We're all the same. There you go. All right. So that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is start slow, finish fast, or if you want, your last mile, you can kick it in if you want, but definitely get in some of that zone two training. Also, why not zone three? Well, zone three, you're going faster. The faster you go, the greater the risk of injury. Who the heck wants that? You don't get any greater efficiency at fat consumption. What you do get later in the season is beneficial to run at zone three, or what we call MRP, marathon race pace, or half marathon race pace, HMRP, right? Those paces are good because then you'll feel what marathon race pace feels like. You'll feel what half marathon race pace feels like. You'll be able to, oh, okay, this is my breathing level on flat ground. And if I go up that hill, I want to maintain my breathing level. I want to maintain the same power output. Power output, if you have a watch that does power output, is a far better methodology than even heart rate or pace, which really isn't the greatest, especially with hills. LA Marathon pace kind of goes out the window because your heart rate will be too high if you maintain pace. Try and run up tempo on the LA Marathon at race pace, marathon race pace. You do that. You try that. See how far you get after that 1 mile uphill. Good luck. um, your heart rate's going to be too high. You're going to be depleting your glycogen too early. So there is a value to do marathon race pace, to feel it, to listen to your breathing, to get the idea of what it feels like. So when you go up that hill, they always say run by feel. That's why. There you go. So, I've already talked about endurance, strength training, high intensity interval training. We're talking about threshold runs, interval runs. Repetition runs are really more like speed work, which would kind of fit into that high intensity interval training category. That kind of stuff. The threshold runs are probably a little more efficient at getting you faster on the longer distance because it raises the bar where you're still using fat as a resource for fuel, right? And if you can raise that bar where you're going faster and still using fat, then you can go farther faster. Got it? If you're doing repetition work, now you're really more, it's all does a little of everything, but now you're doing a little more of engaging and recruiting, which is important. Half your muscles in your body are dormant, right? So if you can recruit or get fast twitch muscles firing, right, as we get older and older and older, we don't use them as much, so they become dormant. You kind of use it or lose it. And they don't really quite go away completely. They're just dormant. Some do, but at any rate, that's what you get back from the repetition training or our pace on our schedule. But as I say, I think the T pace is more efficient for training for something like a marathon because you're raising the bar on where you're still using fat as a resource for fuel. And I mentioned already flexibility work, mobility work right now. Stretch, foam roll, get a massage, do those jackhammer things with the gun, whatever. to pound out, your muscles get knotted up and you want to get those knots to straighten out. That's what those little jackhammer things do. But they don't elongate the muscle that you do from stretching and mobility work. So, general health studies today indicate 3 hours of training a week will increase your longevity, your ability to live longer, and decrease your risk of serious illness like cancer. So even if you never want to do another marathon ever again the rest of your life, and your next goal is going to be getting like a PhD or an MD or a master's degree in something, which is great, I remember seeing a woman sitting on the side of the road, Rose, and she was just looking, kind of pondering the world, sitting on the curb. And I drove over and I walked up to her and I sat down. I said, "You okay?" And she said, "Oh yeah." I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "No, I was just thinking." And I said, "Oh, what's going on?" She said, "You know, I'm thinking of going back to school." She said, "No one in my family has ever gotten a college degree. Nobody. And I'm thinking of going and getting a medical degree, several years of studying, a doctor, medical degree, MD, get the picture." And I said, "Great. Why not? Are you a good student?" She said, "Yeah, I'm a pretty good student. I get good grades." I said, "Great. Do it. Do more of that. Keep going. Don't stop." And today, for the last like probably 15 years, maybe 20 now, she's been a medical doctor. So whatever your goal is, continue to do exercise because you reduce risk of stress and all sorts of things. You increase your heart strength, all sorts of things. So maintain a healthy lifestyle. Pardon me, with some exercise. And also add in three things: aerobic exercise, that zone two endurance work, uh, a little bit of high intensity training, maybe once a week or so, depending on if you're injury prone or not. Continue. Keep in mind, the faster you go, the greater the risk of injury, right? The greater the risk. And three, the third thing would be maintaining strength training. So endurance work, low heart rate, high heart rate work on something. You could do it on a bike. You could. Swimming is pretty tough to get high heart rate on, but for short periods you could, I suppose. Playing tennis, whatever. Um, and then third, strength training, rebuild strength. The biggest problem with older people is they lose strength. They fall down, they break their hip, and within 2 years, they're dead. And I know that sounds horrible, but maintain strength. That's really, really important. Those are some statistics. That happens. So, um, I want all of you to have a happy and healthy life. And here's a little recovery stuff. Just do less for now, more protein, more sleep, taper weeks, rebuild hormone levels. We've talked about all this stuff, strength and stretch. That's really the basis for recovery. But if you want to race, and hopefully you will, train smart and train to win. Because if you don't, you won't. And if you do, you just might. There you have it. I thank you all. And I will see you all at the starting line in September, hopefully, of the Santa Monica Classic or the finish line. I will be at both. And hopefully, the finish line of the Rose Bowl half and the LA Marathon. And hopefully you'll join us again next season and even in the off season. USA Marathon Training takes over in Griffith Park. LA Running Club takes over in Santa Monica. And we kind of just sort of almost keep it going in Balboa Park. So have fun, you guys. That's it from me. And I am going to turn off the recording. For those of you who've been watching at home on the recording, I bid you a good night. And this is my final discussion for the season. It's next Thursday, there will not be a talk, but hopefully this discussion has set you up for the entire summer off season. And if you missed some of it, please, you can find it on Facebook in a few minutes and replay it. Or hopefully you've watched this thing to the end and you're going to have a great next season and a happy and healthy life. For those of you watching at home on the recorded, I bid you a good night. For those of you watching live, hang on one sec. And for the recorded people, good night.